Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Today you join me aboard Precipice for the second video in my series looking at the Blackstone Fortress Escalation expansion pack, and this is another video in which I'm going to try to impart all the information I want to share before my voice gives out because I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather. But in this particular video, what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk through the new mission that you get with this expansion, and then we're going to talk about what elements from the expansion can be integrated back into your base game. So as with every other expansion to date, this expansion comes with a single new mission, and the intention is that you only start this mission once you have completed any other mission that you're currently on. So if you're still working through the base game, you're supposed to finish the base game first. If you finish the base game and you're playing through Dreaded Amble or Traitor Command, you're supposed to finish whichever campaign you're on first before you start this one. And when you are ready to start this one, it has a slightly different setup, and the way in which the campaign works is quite a bit different, because the concept here is that a big bad has taken control of an area of the Blackstone Fortress and has learned how to control it and stabilize it. So rather than going into random areas which are constantly being generated by random exploration cards, you are going into a section of the Blackstone Fortress which is static. The rooms are always in the same place, and that makes it possible to map your route, and indeed that is what you're supposed to do. As you work your way through different chambers, you are supposed to mark your routes on a map that is included on the back of the book, and over time you will build up a map of the area, and so that you can get to where you want to go more easily. So we're going to talk very quickly about how it all sets up, and we'll go from there. So obviously, first of all, we have our Precipice board here, and the new expansion mission, which is actually called the Quest for the Black Shrines, doesn't use the legacy system from the base game. It doesn't use that system where each time you return to Precipice, you add a legacy card to a legacy deck. Instead, it uses this menace tracker. Dun, dun, dun. This represents an attack from lasers on the Blackstone Fortress at Precipice itself. And when you start your game, you add the menace tracker to the bottom. And each time you return to Precipice during your campaign, you have to add a token to the tracker. And there are 4 spaces. And if at any point you have to add a 5th token, boom, that's game over. The quest is failed. The rules say that at that point you have to restart the quest or start a new quest, but if you want to be a little bit more hardcore about it, you can actually say, well, Precipice has been blown up and that's it, it's completely game over. You have to start from scratch, way back at the beginning. It depends how tough you want to be on yourself, but officially it's just that quest is a failure and you have to restart it from scratch or start a different quest. Obviously, there are no tokens on your first game, and like I say, they get added every time you return to Precipice, and there are ways to remove them again. So you're under quite a lot of pressure to keep those tokens down, because you don't ever want to go to 5. The next part of setting up the mission is you have to create your exploration deck. Now, the exploration deck doesn't work in the same way as it does in the base game or the earlier expansions. You actually just shuffle together all of the exploration cards you've got, the combats and the challenges, and you are allowed to add other exploration cards that you have. So if you have purchased Endless Peril, which was the exploration card pack, you can add all of those cards. And if you have Dreaded Amble and Traitor Command, you can add the eligible cards from those expansions as well. You also need to create an encounter deck, and like I say, this expansion doesn't use the legacy system, so you create your encounter deck at the start and it remains consistent throughout your entire run of this mission. And it includes the Traitor Guardsmen, the Negavolt Cultists, Urgles, Spindle Drones, Chaos Beastmen, and Rogue Psychers. It also includes the encounter cards for the cultists and the firebrand, which come in this expansion, and you are also allowed to add any other encounter cards from other expansions you want, if you want to. So if you really want to, you can add in your Chaos Ogre in your Commissar, maybe even a Dreaded Amble if you feel like it. And then once you've done that, you're ready to begin your mission. And the mission doesn't work by flipping through the exploration cards. Instead, you have to refer to the special book. And look, here it is. It says Exploration on the front. And I actually can't show you very much of this book because of spoilers. But I will be able to show you just the start of the mission. And this is the book that on the back has the map that you can use to chart your progress through this area of the Blackstone Fortress. This area is the area you are ultimately attempting to get to, but you have to jump through some hoops to get there. So when you start your very first mission, let's move Precipice out of the way. We don't need Precipice anymore for the time being. Off you go. So when you're ready to start, you read this section of the book. And the turn system for this campaign is pretty much the same as the original turn system from the base game and the other expansions. But instead of drawing an exploration card, you're going to the book. And then once you've resolved whatever's happening in the book, you get a recovery step and then a leader step as normal. And you read this section here and you see that it says go to passage 23. And when you go to passage 23, which I'm not going to show you, it actually asks you to set up 2 encounter cards that you take from your big stack of encounter cards that you prepared at the start of the mission. And that forms like a mini access route, as if you were going into a stronghold or one of the final segments of one of the earlier expansions. And then once you've worked through those exploration cards, you are told to go to a specific chamber. And this book is full of battle maps, each map representing a static chamber within this static area of the Blackstone Fortress. And I will show you the very first one. So here we are. This is the very first map, and this is not a spoiler because this is the gateway. So when you first start the campaign, you will do 2 exploration cards and then you reach this chamber, and this chamber is the one shown here, the gateway. So it will be set up in the same way as any other combat you would normally experience. There's not really any special rules, which is a bit of a shame. I thought having it in a book like this would have been an opportunity to introduce some extra special situations that could occur. But you will notice that there are, in this particular case, 2 exits. One says passage 15, one says passage 14. And we can see up here as well, there's a little diagram. And we've got an arrow pointing up, which means precipice. And then we've got a 15 and a 14. So we fight our way through this chamber, and you have to pick one of these exits to go out of. And when you go out of that exit, you then flip to passage 14 in this book. You read that, complete any challenges that you may be presented with, and then it tells you which chamber you have gone to. And then you can plot that chamber on your map. So for example, completely off the top of my head, let's say we go down through this map, we go out through passage 14, we read passage 14, and passage 14 then says you go to chamber 12. So we now know, and we can plot on our map, that this location here is chamber 12. If we had decided to go through this door, which sticks out here, and it said go to chamber 7, we would know that this chamber here is chamber 7. And the aim is to plot your route all the way through to this throne room. However, before you can access this throne room, you have to defeat 4 specific shrines. Each shrine dedicated to one of the ruinous powers. And each time you complete one of those shrines, you will get a little card like this that matches. And that's just a little reminder of which shrines you have defeated. And every time you defeat a shrine, you return to Precipice. And you then have to start again, going back into this area of the Blackstone Fortress. Now, you may think that sounds really annoying because obviously you go back to the gateway, but there is a way to circumvent areas that you have already plotted, because each time you complete a chamber, you get one of these little chamber cards, and you store this chamber card in your data sleeve, your little stasis chamber, so you can keep track of which chambers you have discovered. And I will show you the card for Chamber 7, the gateway. It's got a little picture of the map that you've fought across, and it has a thing at the bottom here that says clues, and it has a number of clues. And this is the number of clues that you can spend to jump straight to that particular area of the map. Because for this particular expedition, you are using the discovery deck from the base game, and obviously that discovery deck has clue cards in it, and this expansion makes use of those clues. But rather than using those clues to cash in to access the strongholds, you can cash the clues in to jump back to specific areas within the map. So say we'd got down to here somewhere and it said spend 5 clues on this particular chamber. You could spend 5 clues, and then rather than starting at the gateway, you could start down here, and then you can continue exploring from that point. So gradually over time, you're going to chart your progress through this map, and there are certain points where you may go into a passageway that actually leads into a labyrinth outside of the static area of the Blackstone Fortress, and in that case you get a selection of exploration cards, and you have to play through them one at a time. And when you pop out, you don't really know exactly where you've popped out on the map anymore. So there is a certain element of confusion. You can get lost and you might not plot your map that accurately. So there's quite a lot going on there in terms of exploring this area. It's not something that you're going to blitz through quickly, I don't think. There's certainly a lot more to it than there was with the campaigns for Traitor Command and the dreaded Amble. I think you're going to get a lot more game out of this system. But eventually you will access all 4 shrines, defeat them, and then you'll gain access to this location here. Once you've plotted your route to that location, you have the final confrontation with the big bad, and win or lose. And of course, the 4 shrines and this final confrontation have special maps in this book, and they are more like the strongholds. I haven't looked at them because I don't want to spoil them for myself, but they appear to have a similar format to things like the strongholds and the final confrontations in the earlier expansions. So you get a slightly more in-depth objective rather than just moving through a chamber to get to another exit. There's things to do, specific types of enemies, specific event tables and things like that. If you complete the mission, you get to open the big wallet. There is a big wallet. Here we go. Look, it's a big wallet. I have no idea what's in it, and I'm not going to open it and spoil it for myself, but when you complete the campaign, you get to open this wallet. And that is basically how the campaign works. You plot your route through the Blackstone Fortress, you use the book, reading passages which represent like challenge cards, and then facing the chambers, which are more like the combat exploration cards, and occasionally you may have to draw exploration cards as well. And you plot your route, you go back to Precipice. You can choose to return to Precipice every time you complete a chamber, but obviously when you do that, it will increase the menace track. So there's a nice timer mechanism, which does feel a little bit more intense, I think, than the legacy cards. Oh, and one more thing to note is that this mission has its own special event phase table, and that's because it's obviously generating the mission in a slightly different way rather than relying on exploration cards and things like that. But there we go, that's the mission and that's how it works. So it's a very different experience to the base game, and that instantly makes this a much more interesting expansion than the previous two, despite the fact that it seems to be much more in depth. And I think it's going to take a lot longer because obviously you need to find those 4 shrines, and then you obviously need to fight the final battle here at this location. So it seems on a par with the mission from the base game. You're going to keep going in and out. It's not something that you're going to be able to one-shot in a day. You're going to need to keep leaving, going back, tooling up, spending those clue tokens to plot new areas of the map. There's quite a lot of chambers, and then some of the passages and things like that will get you to draw from exploration cards as well. So a session could end up in being quite involved and taking a long time. You could get lucky with the way you plot your route through the map, and you might find the locations relatively quickly, but I don't see that happening. I think there's a lot of game in this box, and I think that was really important to have, because obviously it's a high price tag on this expansion. So I don't think they could have got away with a Traitor Command or Dreaded Amble style extra mission. It had to be something a little bit more in depth, and this is certainly on a par with the base game. But of course, that's not all that the expansion adds. Besides the mission, you obviously get 4 new heroes that we'll be looking at in another video, and you also get rules for Retinue Characters. They've only included 1 Retinue character, it's X101, and the way that Retinue Characters work is you have to find them. They're not immediately available. X101 is in the Blackstone Fortress somewhere. Once you have found him, he will stay with your party, and he isn't classed as a hero, so he's not taking up one of your 4 hero slots. He is an additional character that can come with you. And the rules actually say whenever you start an expedition, whenever you leave Precipice, you can pick 1 retinue character to bring with you. And obviously at the moment we only have X101, so this implies to me that they have other retinue characters planned, and this is something we're going to see in future expansions. And I certainly hope so, because it's a cool idea. And the way retinue characters work is they're like a stripped down hero. They are controlled by the leader, and they will always activate immediately after the leader. And that's quite cool, because it means that you kind of get a double activation. When the leader activates, you then get your retinue activation as well. So it gives you a quick 1-2 opportunity, perhaps before enemies get to retaliate. But retinue characters are certainly not as powerful as actual heroes. They don't have activation dice for a start. They actually get a number of activations that they can use. In the case of X101, he gets 2 activations as standard, and he can only pick from moving, shooting his grav gun, attacking with his hydraulic claw, or recuperating. He can be injured and he can die in the same way as a hero, and obviously once he is dead, he's no longer available. That retinue character is no longer available. But he can heal up and things like that. And he can also inspire the same way as a hero. In the case of X101, I'm not too keen on his inspiration, because it's basically if Daedalosus is on the expedition, then X101 starts inspired. And that just ties him to a specific character. And it means that if you've got access to this character, you're probably always going to take Daedalosus so you can get the most out of X101. And I don't really like that. I don't really like the idea that I'm being made to pick a character that I might not necessarily want to take with me. And also, of course, if Daedalosus dies, then X101 loses functionality for the rest of your game until you reset. But yeah, that's basically how the retinue characters work. And even once you've completed the quest for the Black Shrines, you still have access to him as long as he's alive. And at the start of every expedition, you can choose to take him with you if you so wish. Or you can take a different retinue character if they release some more and you have access to those instead. But speaking of having completed the shrines, this is the point in the video where I'm going to basically go through, once you've completed this mission, once you've dealt with that, once you've dealt with the shrines, what do you get to take back into your base game experience? Because with the Dreaded Amble and with Traitor Command, when you are finished with those missions, there were certain cards that you could feed back into your base game. That's not exactly possible with this Escalation expansion because it doesn't have any new exploration cards. It has an exploration book instead. But obviously, the Retinue character is something that is persistent and you will have access to even once you have completed this campaign. It's obviously worth noting that having a Retinue character is like an extra bonus for your team with no real downside. So it is something that is going to make other missions slightly easier while you have a Retinue character available. Obviously, it's your choice whether you choose to add a Retinue character, but yeah, it's something that's gonna nudge the dial a little bit more towards an easier gaming experience. Obviously, you get your 4 new heroes, assuming they live. There's nothing to say you have to use these heroes for the Escalation expansion, by the way. It kind of implied that they're the characters associated with this particular storyline. And obviously X101 is linked to Daedalosus in terms of his inspiration, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You can still carry on using any heroes you want, and if one of these heroes dies, you can bring in another hero. It's worth noting, of course, that once you have an extra 4 heroes in your roster, you have more heroes, and that means you're less likely to fail your campaign by running out of heroes, because it's always been the case that if enough heroes die that you can't muster a party of 4 to go on an expedition, then you've lost. But having an extra 4 characters prevents that from happening. But yes, so you get 4 extra characters. You also get 2 new types of enemies. You get the Cultist Firebrand and you get Cultists. And you get the encounter cards for using those. And there's 4 encounter cards for them, and they're all the same. When you go back to your base game or a one-off adventure, if you want to potentially face Cultists or the Firebrand, you just add those encounter cards to your encounter deck. And this is much the same as with the smaller expansions, Dreaded Amble, Traitor Command. It's your choice. If you want to add those Cultists, then you can do, but you don't have to. And there's no legacy cards for them, so it's not like you can gradually introduce them through the legacy system if you replay the base game mission. It's just something that you can choose to add in if you feel that your experience is too easy and you want to make it a little bit tougher, or just more varied, of course. And there is actually a 3rd type of enemy in this particular expansion. I'm not going to show you the character card for it because it is the Big Bad. I will say that the Big Bad reuses a miniature from the base game, so you don't get a new miniature for that particular character. Furthermore, you don't get an encounter card for that Big Bad. You just get a new data sheet for that particular boss. So it's not as easy to integrate that boss character into your other games. The best way to do it is when you draw an encounter card that would spawn the base game version of that particular enemy, you instead use this new version from Escalation instead. I've danced around that a little bit just to avoid any spoilers, but basically you would have a choice of 2 different data sheets. You could use the base game data sheet, or you could use the Escalation expansion data sheet, which is a more powerful version of the original enemy. So you can integrate that as well. Furthermore, because we have new heroes, we also get 2 new ships. There they are. 3 of the characters arrive on the ultimatum. It's Naem Shai Marad, Aradia Madeline, and Gottfried de Montbard. And then Daedalosus arrives on the Seeker Omicron. It's the Seeker Omicron Zeta, sorry. And those ships come with their own resource decks. So if you're using any of these new heroes in one-off adventures or any other campaign or any other expansion, then you would have access to these ships and you would have access to any resource cards associated with those ships. Then there is whatever is in the wallet. The wallets normally contain something persistent, something that forever changes your game. So if you complete this Escalation expansion, then you get access to whatever is in this wallet, but I don't know what it is. But I'm assuming it's going to be along the lines of previous expansions. I just don't know why it's in a massive wallet. Finally, because there are no exploration cards, and there's no new combat cards or challenge cards, there is a way in the book that you can actually incorporate challenges and chambers from this book in one-off adventures or whatever. It's a little bit of a slapdash integration that I'm not very keen on, but basically if you draw a combat card, you can choose to either play that combat card as you normally would, or you can roll a d20 and you can refer to a chart in the rules for the Escalation expansion, which will direct you to one of the battle maps from the exploration book, and you can use that battle map instead. And similarly, if you draw a challenge card, you can choose to either play the challenge card as normal, or you can roll a d20, refer to a chart, which will direct you to one of the passages from the Escalation exploration booklet, and you can do that challenge instead. Now, I'm not that keen on that particular integration, and for such an expensive expansion, I think they could have included a little deck of exploration cards which recreated the information from the exploration book, just so that when you'd completed this campaign, this expansion, you could just take those exploration cards and shuffle them into your base game deck, just for a more seamless integration. And you do really want to include the combat maps from the Escalation expansion, because they obviously make use of these new boards. You get 4 new board sections which are integrated into a number of the battle maps. And if you don't use the battle maps from Escalation, then you won't be using these boards and you won't be getting full utility out of it. So yeah, if you do this method where you roll the dice and refer to the chart and then use the battle maps from the book, you will be able to integrate these new board sections into your games as well. But it's not the cleanest integration. A small deck of cards would have easily resolved that for me. But that is basically it. So, just to recap, as well as getting obviously a mission to complete, and quite an in-depth mission, you are getting 4 new characters with 2 new ships and 2 new decks of resource cards. You're getting 1 retinue character. You're getting 3 new enemy types with encounter cards for 2 of those enemy types. And you are getting the option to access new challenges and new battle maps, and making use of these card tiles as well. So there's quite a lot there. There is quite a lot that is available to be ported back into your base game, or if you play any other expansions afterwards, or if you play your one-off dungeon plunges. There's a lot going on. Oh yeah, the sealed envelope too. Don't forget that. But anyway, that's it from me. Once again, I've gone on quite a lot, but hopefully this has been useful in terms of explaining how the new mechanisms work, but also explaining what this expansion is bringing to the game as a whole, for your continued enjoyment beyond the mission that it provides. Thank you very much for bearing with me, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.